Welcome to I Studio. This is Diane Williams. We're back in the studio and I have a project today. I am going to work back into a painting that I had at one point thought was finished. So I'm sure you all have a lot of paintings that have been sitting in your painting racks for years and years, not selling, and you pull them out one day and say, you know what? This painting wasn't really finished. I thought it was, but it's not. It certainly is a great start. I like a lot of things about the painting, but I don't think it's come together in its fullness yet. So I'm going to work back into it. You can start out by whiting out a painting that you want to completely obliterate and start fresh. This is a beautiful stretcher bar. It's 30 inches by 32 inches, 2-inch depth, custom made, beautiful. Maybe I want to start fresh, but in this case, no. I have a lot to work with here. These are some beautiful ink marks. I've got the beginning of some flower stencils, some florals. It has an overall interesting movement. So I'm going to just begin here. I can see I put a little piece of collage paper on, but it's just floating there. It has no real purpose. Same here. Found some interesting collage paper. Oh, I'll stick some collage paper on. Why? It really doesn't have a place here. So I'm going to work back into it and see what we can get. You ready to work with me? Grab an old painting and let's get started. When I start out with a painting like this, I want to spend a lot of time looking so I can figure out what my first steps will be. I have been given some transparent papers, and I do like layering with transparent papers. And one of the first things I'm thinking is which part of this painting would look great under a transparency. You know, I love the blue. This is going to give me trouble because I'm a little attached to it already. The blue at the bottom there. So I have to be careful about how precious I make that area. It feels precious to me. Let me reorient the painting first of all. I'm going to reorient it so that I'm not hanging on to a composition that was there. And boy, there is really some beautiful translucency, some real nice spots on the painting. Let's see what the best way to start would be. So I want you to spend a lot of time looking at your painting, kind of get a feel for the direction, what it is you might want from the piece. I recently bought some beautiful stencils, custom made from Stencil Stop, and thinking I want to start with some florals. There's some beautiful underpainting, so I think the colors underneath could show through in the areas of the stencil that will be the blocked off areas. Let's see what happens. I don't like this corner of the painting too much. So it's very difficult when you're working with an old painting not to get attached to certain parts and try to preserve those spots. And that will certainly stop you. You can't really work around a spot in a painting, especially something you're revisiting. It's been several years. So let's see. This stencil looks a bit delicate. It has some little hanging spots, and I tend to be pretty rough on my stencils. And so I'm going to have to be a little bit careful with this one. I'm going to start with some house paint. I'm actually going to set this right on the painting. And I'm going to use a brush. I'm holding the stencil in place. I'm hoping it doesn't move. It could. A lot of times I will move a stencil just to offset it a little bit. I can see myself being a little careful. I'm a little afraid of this particular stencil, and I got to put a little elbow grease in, so I'm going to stand up for a minute. This was a beautiful chrysanthemum photograph that I found. Sent it to Stencil Stop, and I really liked what they came up with. So let's see. It's 24-inch stencil. It's large. They call these Mylar stencils. I'm not sure why. To me, this is vinyl. But I'm not very careful with my stencils. I don't clean them. So they tend to get a lot of paint buildup on them. And after a while, they don't have the detail that they do when they're new. So this should be a pretty finely detailed image. Okay, the fun part. Wow. Absolutely beautiful and much, much better already. Much better already. I have a second stencil I'm going to use and try to get a nice composition. Let's see. The second stencil is an interesting stencil. I had another stencil similar to this, and it got so clogged up with paint I lost all the detail. So I had to have a friend Photoshop this for me and try to bring it back as much as possible. Now what I think I'm going to do with this one is go with a little different shade of white. You know what? I have a different idea. I went to look at my paints and get a different shade of white, and I found a shade of gold that I think is really cool. Let's do it in gold. I left the white on my brush. That will give me a little lighter shade when I start. A little lighter value or key. I can see that this color is working beautifully with the colors I already have down. So, in case you wonder why my aprons are always so full of paint, I'm leaning right into the painting because I don't want to move the stencil. I'm not a neat painter, I'm very messy. The reveal. Boom. Okay, the gold didn't show up as beautifully as the white. However, I can always go over this gold with a layer of white. I'm going to put a third stencil in. I think I'm going to use white, keeping the gold on my brush. Set him up there again. So because my brush has the gold in it, it's going to give me a little different shade of white than my original flower. And this is something that you can try with me at home. If you have an old painting, and if you have an old stencil, put the video on pause and see what happens. Change hands. I love to work with my non-dominant hand to get a different type of a mark. I'm holding the brush from the very end of the handle, so I don't have much control. You're probably thinking, well, this is a stencil. What does it matter if you have control of the brush or not? And believe it or not, it does matter how you make your strokes with the stencil, because you can show energy by how you're making the mark on the stencil. If I'm very meticulous, I know some stencilers dab, dab, dab. I would get a very perfect rendition of the stencil, but I want my stencil to just be a little bit of a guide. And if I really put my body into it, this energy will show through in the painting. That's one reason why I prefer stencil over, say, projection, and then filling in the spaces, which is another way that you can get imagery. I like the freedom of the stencil already, an improvement. I like it so far. I'm feeling the need for a very, very deep orangish red color somewhere in here. So I could go around the flower. I could put another flower image over. Let's find the color first. It's actually a beautiful color. Now, I often talk about foreground, middle ground, and background. And the background of this painting at this point is aquamarine. When I add a red like this wants to become the background. So at some point, it's probably going to become a problem. And I may have to either change the background to red or go over some of the red with the aquamarine. We'll see. But for now, I think it's adding some beautiful accents. You don't have to plan the whole painting out. Let some things happen spontaneously. Don't worry about if it's the right move or the wrong. So I'm doing something I don't really recommend. I'm kind of coloring inside the lines and kind of outlining what I did with the stencil, which is kind of preserving the flower shape. Not necessarily a good move, but at this point it's fine, because I may come back through the flower shape and totally mess it up. But at this point, what I'm thinking is, I could cover up these flower shapes with some thin tissue paper and then sand into them to get some really neat effects. So I'm thinking a couple of steps ahead. Believe you me, I'm no chess player, because I can't plan my moves that far ahead and be accurate. I just get a little notion and maybe stick with it. Maybe stick with it for a minute before I abandon it. This collage looks a little better than it did when I started. I don't really see what it was. And this was a ready-made piece of print paper. I didn't make it myself. It's nothing precious. So I got a little 1/4 of an inch piece that I preserved. Don't really need a whole lot. A little bit goes a long way with a collage like that. Interesting. I have some red behind the flower, some blue up in this area. Feel I need a little red over here. what I'm trying to do is establish some colors. I don't think this blue is working particularly well here. I want to get the red in this corner. It's a nice shade of blue, but it's not really working. So that I sort of have a division between the aquamarine and the red, and I don't want it to be too much of a diagonal, and I can see that could be an issue. I can let a little of the blue peek through. It's really too early to make decisions. Although sometimes when you work back into a painting, they may resolve themselves fairly quickly, because you have such a great head start. There's a great color palette going on, so I've kind of already established my color palette, and I'm happy about that. And I think I need a little red down here in the corner. This should be red. Then we'll put it up on the wall and we'll evaluate it. We'll take a look. What I'm basically doing right now is blocking in color so I can find some kind of a movement, see if I like the way it's moving, if it's feeling blocked anywhere. Letting the red come through as a background. It's really quite nice. Wondering now if the red should sweep all the way up into that area in the corner here. It's aquamarine. Should it be red? The only way I can really tell is by putting it up on the wall. Let's do that and see. I am pleased already with a lot of the improvements on the painting. It isn't anywhere near resolved and may not look anything like this when I'm finished. I changed the orientation already. I have spun it on the wall, liking it this way better. Remember, I talked about, establishing your foreground, middle ground, and background. And I think that there's a good division between the aquamarine and the red up on the top. And I'm not really sure which will come together as the far background, which is the middle ground. Right now, it looks to me like the aquamarine is the far background. I like the graphic quality of the flowers. I'm not guaranteeing that they're going to stay graphic flowers. They might. It just depends. I have to look at it for a long, long time. At this point, it has to dry, and when I come back, I'll probably go into it with some transparent paper and see where I might want to put some transparent papers, how the flowers might come through the paper. Let's just let it dry, do something else to keep us occupied, and I'll see you next time, next week, okay? Do try this at home, be safe, and I'll talk to you later.